Hello, everybody, and welcome to another episode of the Faerie Conclave. This is episode 90. I'm your host, Alec. My pronouns are he, him, and I'm super excited to have Katie Karlov on for an episode. How are you doing today, Katie?
I'm doing great. Thanks for having me.
Yeah, of course. I had been following you on Twitter, I think, if not also a couple other places, for a while, and then I met you in person at the Magic Summit last year, and ever since then I've been wanting to record an episode with you. So thank you for setting the time aside to talk about a commander deck with me.
Yeah, of course. Yeah, it was so cool meeting you in person, and after I met you, you had the cutest fanny pack I've ever seen, and I bought one because I loved it so much.
That was so funny. I know, I didn't realize how awesome that fanny pack was until I was using it at the summit, and I was just storing all kinds of random things in there. I was getting stickers and artist proofs and stuff, and I was just storing so many things in there, and I had just gotten it the week before for my birthday, so yeah, it was the perfect way to introduce it. So I love
that. I loved it so much I actually bought one for my best friend for Christmas too.
Oh my god. Okay. That's awesome. I love it. Spreading the word of the fanny pack to the community.
Yes.
But yeah, so you are Katie Karlov. You are a streamer, and you're a member of very beloved groups in the Magic community, Birds of Paradise. And and you also, I feel like you just kind of do a lot of guesting on streams as well, and videos and stuff like that. But that's a very baseline introduction to you. So I would love to hand it over to you to introduce yourself a little bit more.
Yeah, I am a Twitch streamer. I stream EDH on my channel on Wednesdays, and I try to get, some of my favorite people on. I really like to play Commander with my friends. So, especially during COVID, that was the primary way to do it. So,
yes.
It's super fun to be able to do it and entertain others as well. And I'm a member of the Birds of Paradise, one of the co-founders. So we just are a group of creators that want to raise money for charity at events. So that's kind of the goal. And we're still working on getting to the point where we're established at these events, highlighted at these events, and able to really broad strokes be as many as possible. It's a goal that we're working on, but we've done a couple, and it's been really fun, and I love the ladies of Birds of Paradise, and
Nice. I love it. And I wanted to say that your Wednesday streams, I feel like you always have such a good vibe about the guests that you bring on, and it's super entertaining to watch. So yeah, I like that a lot about it.
Yeah, I put a lot of thought into who I'm going to have on. I don't just pick names out of a hat. I want to find people that are going to vibe together and, bounce off of each other. So thank you for mentioning that, because I do put a lot of thought into it.
Yeah, no, it definitely shows, and the vibes are always good. So yeah, which makes it fun to watch. I like watching people play Magic that are vibing and chatting and having a good time. It's much more fun to watch that kind of stuff.
Totally.
So I have you on today to talk about one of your commander decks, which I am both excited and scared for because of who the commander is. But before we get into it, let's do our community spotlight for the episode. And today I wanted to do a shout out for somebody else who I also met at the MTG Summit last year. And that is Bert, who is an awesome member of the community. And we hung out a lot over that weekend of the summit. And it was awesome. It was he's just the most welcoming and friendly person. And I'm super excited to do a shout out. So you can find Bert at the Pod MTG. And at Zero Games with 2 R's on Twitter. I'll have links down below as well. But yeah, so Bert does a whole lot of content kind of here and there. He is a writer on EDH Rec, and also does the Scrap Trawlers and And I see him on streams all the time, and I'm sure he does some other stuff too, but I am hoping to have him on an episode in the future someday. But yeah, so shout out to Bert, who's an awesome member of the community who you should definitely go follow.
Yeah, definitely. Bert is incredible.
Yes, I love him. So, okay, let's get into the interview questions I've got for you today. And the first one is, who is your commander and what inspired you to build this deck in the first place?
Yeah, so my commander is Koma Cosmos Serpent. The truth of why I built this commander is because I learned about commander in the beginning of 2021, and my friend had brought over a couple commander decks, and then I sat down the next day and I was like, okay, what commanders do I have? And I had like, I don't know, like a handful of 6 or something that I was like, these are kind of cool. And I sent them to my friend. I was like, which one of these is like the best one? And he was like, what the? Like, we just have Koma just in your bulk.
Casually, yeah.
And he was like, well, that one's really good, so build that one. And I was like, okay, sure. And I started building it with just bulk that I had laying around. And then, I went to Target and they had like all the commander precons there. And then the Reap the Tide ones, which is the Simic AEC Tyrant of Gyre Strait, was there. And so I bought that. And then I basically kind of pushed them together and made Koma the helm of that deck. Nice. And obviously over the last 2 years, I've changed it so much. But I do have a lot of the big creatures in there from the precon still.
Nice. Okay. Yeah, I love that. So I wanted to say that Koma is, I feel like back when I started playing Commander in like 2015, there were a bunch of commanders at the time, or not a bunch, there were a few commanders at the time that were just like feared by everybody. And they, like anytime they would come up, everyone would like immediately be like, okay, this person needs to die. And it's cards like Kalia and other commanders kind of like that. And then I feel like the power level or like how people played commander, it just got really popular all of a sudden, and there were so many commanders that I feel like there weren't really any that anyone was scared of anymore because there were so many options that were pretty strong. But I feel like today in 2023, I am willing to admit that Koma is a commander that I am scared of. Like it kind of throws me back to those times of being like, whoa, okay, someone's playing this. Koma is one of those, I feel.
I don't do this intentionally, but I tend to... I'm a Timmy in Magic terms. I like big, splashy creatures. When I used to just play, like, I don't even know what I guess it was standard. I loved the monstrosity mechanic. So I just liked getting big creatures on the board from when I first started playing Magic. So I tend to build those scary commanders. My 4 decks that I play the most are Koma, Kalia of the Vast, Toxrill, and Tiamat. So I definitely have a type. Koma is just the first one that I built.
I love it. Okay, so first of all, I mentioned Kalia earlier as an example, and I totally forgot that you have a Kalia deck, but it could have been on my mind because of I was thinking about the moment where you melded Brazella with that deck. I was thinking about that earlier today, so that could have been it. But I love that. I think it's cool to know like what kind of power level you enjoy and what kind of stuff you like to do in a game of Commander, and then you just like you build your decks to do that kind of thing. Yeah, I'm into that. Could you read Koma for us? It's like it does so much stuff.
Yeah, so Koma Cosmos Serpent costs 3, 2 green, and 2 blue, so that's 7 mana. He's a legendary serpent, and it says this spell can't be countered. At the beginning of your upkeep, create a 3/3 blue serpent creature token named Koma's Coil. Sacrifice another serpent, and you can choose one. You can tap target permanent. Its activated abilities can't be activated this turn. And you can also sacrifice a serpent to give Koma indestructible until end of turn. So protection, 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 protection.
Yeah. Yeah. It's like so much stuff that just makes it hard to get rid of Koma.
Yep.
Yeah. And then so it makes a Koma's Coil at the beginning of each upkeep, right? So you have like so many resources to tap people's permanents every turn. And also just a whole bunch of 3/3s. I feel like they're always... I can't remember if I was playing against you or if I was just watching. I might have just been watching a game, but I feel like every time I saw you playing Koma, you had like at least 12 Koma's Coils out at any given moment.
Yeah.
So, yeah.
So a big theme in this deck the way I built it is to try to make copies of Koma and to take advantage of tokens, whether that's making more tokens or obviously, like I said, making copies of Koma so that every turn I'm making more tokens.
Ooh, okay.
Yeah.
Yeah, that's brutal. And then so all of those copies will also be able to get indestructible and can't be countered. Yeah, I could definitely see that getting pretty out of hand pretty quickly. So yeah, thank you for introducing the deck. Could you talk a little bit more about what changes it has gone through since you first put it together?
So obviously, since it started kind of as a pre-con, well, it had one iteration before I put the pre-con as part of it. I don't remember what was in it. It was probably just a lot of ramp.
Yeah.
But it kind of, started off as mostly a pre-con, and I've just slowly added better lands, added more things that make more tokens, added things that make copies of Koma. That was not originally one of the plans of the deck. Like, I like to look at a deck as there's like a plan A, a plan B, and there's like a backup plan to those. And definitely making copies of Koma was not a plan at the start of the deck. And over time, I've pulled cards like we pulled Sakashima of 1,000 Faces. And so I was like, well, this is an auto include in Koma because I can just make more coils. And then it just went from there. Like Double Major is another one that wants to make copies. And Spark Double is another one that I run.
Yeah.
But yeah, overall, it's just this deck is like, it's all about ramping, protecting Koma, and trying to make as many tokens as possible.
I'm super into it. I think it's pretty wild how there are a lot of cards recently that let you copy your commanders because it makes them not legendary or something like that. Yep. And it's horrifying when your commander is something like Koma and you can just get more versions of it for like 4 mana.
Right.
That's very scary. I think a lot of commanders probably just like don't need to have copies of them a lot of the time because maybe they're like cheaper than 4 mana and it's not super worth it, or you just don't need that effect as much. But the creating the Koma's coils every upkeep multiple times, I could just see that being like, I don't even know what I would do to stop that. It seems so powerful.
The other thing about, like, because I mentioned earlier that I have a Toxtrol deck, and Toxtrol has a lot of the same pieces. The name of my Toxtrol deck in Maxfield is Evil Koma. Because
nice.
It shares a lot of the same concepts. Like, you want to make as many tokens as possible. You want to ramp really hard, and you want to... And I have, like, a couple... I think I have, like, 2 ways to copy Toxtrol so that I can just make more slime counters. It's a lot of the same theory there. I look at them. They're like evil twins to each other.
That's fun. Yeah, I hadn't really realized that, but yeah, they both have kind of some kind of removal on them, and also they protect themselves really well. So yeah, I could definitely see that. And Toxtrol does kind of look like a really gross version of Koma if you look a little bit harder.
Like if you took the guts out of Koma, it would be Toxtrol.
Yeah, exactly. I'm also noticing in your deck list you got like quite a few very fancy cards, like borderless art, like full art cards and stuff like that, and I love to see that. It definitely shows that you've put a lot of effort into this deck.
Yeah, I swapped out a lot of I'm trying to get as many of the borderless in this deck as possible. There's a lot of them that are really expensive or they don't come in a borderless. The one that I always wish I had was the Avenger of Zendikar borderless one.
Yeah.
That's just one of those things I haven't done yet, but it's one of my favorite decks. So I consistently try to like make little tweaks and upgrades to it as I go.
Yeah, I am also a big fan of the borderless like full art cards. And I think it would be really cool to just have an entire deck of those someday. That would look really, really awesome.
Yeah, Mara has one actually.
Ooh.
And it's really cool, but she like played it with me one time, and she dropped like a borderless land, and she goes, "Do you know what the sub theme of this deck is?" And I was like, "No." And then she played a borderless Swiftfoot Boots, and I was like, "Oh, I get it now."
I love that. That is fun. I like just kind of like silly restrictions like that. Like, I know some people love to do the like, I'll build a deck with only the like retro old frames.
Yes.
Just as a deck building challenge. And I think stuff like that is really fun.
Yeah, I know somebody too who has a sign. All of their cards are signed in the deck.
Ooh. Yeah, that's another one. I would love to do something like that someday. I was noticing actually you have a little section for like a card you've got signed in this deck. I was thinking I should do something like that so I can track which cards I have signed, because I have like 3 or 4 in each deck, but I don't track it at all, so I don't really remember until I play them. But yeah,
I love the collection storage of Maxfield, and so I try to like make it as accurate as possible when I'm putting my cards in there. So like, my doubling season that I bought at Command Fest Bellevue is signed, and so I marked it as signed.
Yeah, that's kind of like the dream, is to have all of your cards signed by the artists.
Yeah.
And it would be really cool to do that someday. So maybe I should utilize the collection feature a little bit better so I can track that, because I definitely am a bit disorganized when it comes to which cards I have signed. We talked a little bit about how you are into like very strong commanders with like big creatures. But if you wanted to talk about Koma a little bit more, what is it that you just kind of like most about playing this deck when you sit down to play it?
So Koma is a Simic commander, and so I often say like, oh, it's just like Simic ramp into a giant snake. But the best part about this deck is that pretty consistently I can get Koma out on turn 4, as long as I have a reasonable starting hand. I have so much ramp in this deck that it's kind of impossible to avoid it. So casting Koma, I've usually warned people, because like when I play, like, this isn't like by any means the perfect Koma deck, right? This is just my version of it. When I play it with people, like you said earlier, a lot of people will be like, "Oh my God, you're playing Koma!" Like, "Oh God, I hate that commander," And so then I'm like, okay, well, just so you know, like, Koma can come out early. Like, I can get him out early. I can recast him multiple times. So just want to put that out there. I think the other thing that I put in this deck to kind of make it, I wanted to add in the synergy. So one of my favorite cards in this deck is a card called Whelming Wave, which is a 2 and 2 blue sorcery that says return all creatures to their owner's hands except for krakens, leviathans, octopuses, and serpents. So obviously Koma is a serpent. All of the coils are serpents. So a couple other creatures in my deck are leviathans, krakens. I don't think I have an octopus. A lot of the other creatures I have in my deck that are not Koma are big, giant creatures that come in, and it's like, if Koma wasn't bad enough, like, here's Nezahal and here's Aesi and here's Slinvoda. So it's like just like a big groaning creatures that people see and they're like, oh crap, that's on the board.
Yeah, I really like that. I didn't notice that you had Whelming Wave in here, but I was going to say that this deck list, it's like very different from what you might see on like the EDH rec page for Koma. Like, it's not like it's CEDH level, like overwhelming Koma deck, which I'm super into. Like, it has a lot of flavor, and I really like. I did notice a lot of like krakens, and so the Kraken Leviathan Serpent Octopus thing is really cool.
Yeah, I really also wanted to use creatures that make other kinds of tokens. Because really what this deck ultimately wants to do is go wide. I love winning via combat damage. I just think it's so funny because it's kind of not a thing in Commander. Like, I mean, it is, but it's like kind of the boring way to win, I guess. And at least that seems to be the consensus of some people.
Right.
Is that you don't really win by combat. But I like winning by combat. So like my win cons in this deck are Craterhoof Behemoth, which is like an obvious in a go wide. Overrun, again, another obvious one, and Azuri's Predation, which is just a good board wipe, hopefully. And then I can get through with like a lot of creatures on combat. So, yeah, I mean, like, that's the thing. I didn't want to make it like this, like, CEDH, play my whole deck.
Yeah.
Cast a Serpent. I wanted this to be about what the commander does. I mean, which, you know, duh. But, like, there's obviously a way to build it that makes it really competitive. And I just want to play it because it's fun.
Yeah, it seems like you have your power level and where you want it down really well, which I think is a great sign. When I'm kind of like sitting down to play a game with somebody, if they can like explain their deck in a way that you just did, I think that's like a really good sign that we're going to have a really great game. And you're not like trying to be a little like deceitful about how powerful your Koma deck is. You're like, I'm doing this like a couple things with it, and the creatures are like Krakens and Leviathans and stuff like that. But it's still a Koma deck, so it has that like inherent power level that Koma brings on its own. So I like your honesty in describing it.
Yeah, I don't ever want to... I mean, a lot of the good vibes on my Twitch channel comes from this, like, clarity. I mean, no one likes to sit down for a game and be like, oh, it doesn't do anything. It's just like, you know, I just hang out, I cast my commander. And then it's like their commander is like, comes out, and then they go infinite. And you're like,
yeah.
Oh, okay. Well, what a fun game we just had.
Yeah, which is, I don't know, saying that, it seems like so weird that somebody would do that, but I have had people who I've played with at like a local game store or at events who I didn't know who totally did something along those exact same lines, and I was just like, okay, cool. I don't know why you didn't why you weren't honest, but so I think that's definitely something that is important to talk about. And and I can tell that you are already very good at doing stuff like that because I played with you a couple times. And it's definitely very important. So, okay, so we've talked about what kind of like the goals of this deck are and what you like the most about playing it. What would you say are this deck's weaknesses?
Well, like I said, because I have so much ramp in it, a lot of time, not a lot, but like, you know, part of the times when I'm playing it, I get completely mana flooded, where I'm like, oh God, please give me something good, like a Pact of Negation on top, or, you know, like, or a big creature I can cast, and I get like a land, or I get a ramp spell, or a creature that gets me more lands, and I'm like, I have no cards in hand, and this does not help me. I think I've tried to like supplement a little bit of that mana flooding with card draw, so that I constantly have like a good grip of cards. So I'm not completely flooded, but it still happens. I think that's probably the biggest weakness of this deck, is that maybe there's too much ramp.
Gotcha. Yeah, I was gonna say, I also, like you, I'm a big fan of just having like big rampy decks that have big creatures.
Yeah.
And so that is an issue that I'm very familiar with. When you have like 8 mana on turn 4 because you've had such a good like start to the game, but then you just like keep drawing more either lands or more ramp spells, and you're like, okay, I got enough of those. I could use a creature now. I totally get that.
In terms of like, I looked at my deck this morning and I broke it down by like what the card does, and in terms of the like themes of my cards, I have like my top kind of spell that I cast in my, or creature that does this is ramp, and then it's protection right after that. So just a lot of like counter spells, removal. And then the third thing is card draw. I just like have a ton of card draw in this deck. In fact, some of my ramp creatures that give me more lands or more mana also draw me cards. So yeah, hopefully I get all of those things. But it has happened where I only get the sorceries that let me like get another land or get 2 lands or sacrifice a land to get 2 lands. And I'm like, okay, but where are all of my card draw land creatures?
I think that is actually the key, exactly what you said, to like if you have a deck that needs lots of lands and lots of ramp, then you also kind of need like a little bit more card draw than maybe other decks would. So I think that's great advice for this type of deck. And it does help that you are in Simic colors, so you have like Tatyova or AC that kind of do both.
Yeah, and Nezahal, I mean, is one of those like auto includes, I think, in this deck. Even though he costs 7, I mean, you want like big, like you don't really want big creatures that are going to cost as much as Koma, because then you're like, okay, I cast Koma, now I cast Nezahal, I still have no mana to do anything else. But Nezahal gives you no maximum hand size. He lets you draw a bunch of cards. So I do feel like, you know, if you're building Koma, like I feel like Nezahal is an auto include, even though I know a lot of people get worried about like their mana value like curve in their deck. But yeah, I don't know. I'd rather play a giant. If I'm going to cast a 7-drop, I might as well cast 2.
I love that. Yeah, that's great. This is like a great rant for the episode. I think more people should just play more 7+ mana cost creatures in their decks.
Yeah. My highest mana value card in this deck is Slinvoda, and it's a 8-drop.
Beautiful.
Crater Hoof's also an 8-drop.
Yeah, exactly like that. I feel like of course, some people in some play groups are going to want to like shave down your average mana value to like from 2.1 to 2, and that's like a big move. But I'm a fan of going the opposite direction a lot of the time. And so I think, throwing in a couple 7 mana creatures. I think actually what you were saying earlier about combat damage wins, I do feel like there are some games where somebody just kind of like curves out with their creatures really nicely, and they'll like play one big creature each turn, and then they just kind of win because of that. And nobody else has creatures fast enough. Yeah, I don't know. Sometimes just like playing a big creature one after another can really do it for you.
Yeah, totally. I think, like I said, I mean, I'm going to cast a 7-drop commander, hopefully as early as turn 4. So that means I have plenty of time to bring out like Avenger of Zendikar and Slinvoda, and then do an extra turns with Karn's Temporal Sundering. Like I have the mana to do all of that. So why not do it?
I love it. Yeah, and I guess we hadn't talked about it too much earlier, but I'm honestly okay with Koma having so much protection for itself because it's 7 mana. And if somebody does find a way to like exile it or something, like then it's going to cost 9 the next turn, which is so much.
Yeah.
So yeah, I honestly like you don't really see 7 mana commanders too often. So I'm coming around on Koma being like totally fine, just, you know, because of that and a lot of other things.
It's like when he comes out, everyone's like, oh shit, you know? Yeah. Oh, can I cuss on here?
Oh yeah, totally.
Oh, okay, cool.
Yeah.
Once Koma's out, everybody's like, oh crap, he's here. But like generally the way I play Koma too is like, you know, a normal sane person might have 9 mana or 10 mana before they cast a 7-drop commander, so that they have mana open for like a counter spell or anything that might try to remove Koma. Koma can't be countered, so innately it's kind of harder to remove. But when he first comes out, he's very vulnerable. He's naked without a coil on the board. So usually I'm like, cast Koma, pass, and I just like hope that nobody has a response to remove Koma on my end step, because if they do, then that's it. I can't do anything about it, because I usually cast Koma as soon as I have 7 mana. I don't, because of the way he is. I do feel like I prefer to just get him out as soon as possible and not worry about somebody removing him right away, even though I think you could see that as like a misplay. I just think it's funnier to just like, he's here, I am all tapped out, and I don't have anything else to do. Goodbye.
Yeah, might as well. And also, when I have like high mana value commanders, I'm like, yeah, I know I should try to like protect it with a counterspell or something, but once you've done all the work to like finally get to 7 mana, it's like, okay, yeah, like I got here, of course I'm gonna cast my commander.
Exactly.
But yeah, I hadn't really thought about it, but it is interesting that there's like a tiny window of time after you've cast Koma, because it can't be countered, so it like has to be on the battlefield, but before the next person's upkeep, where you can have a coil to give it indestructible, where you can like blow it up with anything. So yeah, that makes sense. There's like that one little like post combat main phase where somebody can do something to it that you need to watch out for.
Koma is really vulnerable to exile too. Like it doesn't do, and it's like, you know, he has the tap down ability, but that's not relevant because you could like tap down somebody's mana rock for them to cast a exile spell, and then they can tap it in response and still do it. So it's like, yeah, he's a little vulnerable to exile spells. And unless I have a counter spell in hand, I can't do anything about it.
Gotcha. Yeah, that makes sense. Yeah, maybe I was more scared of Koma at the beginning of this episode than I should have been, because now that you mention it, like a lot of removal spells these days tend to be exile. Yeah, and so one like Swords to Plowshares will take care of this for at least for a turn or two. So I'm coming around on it. I'm really into it.
Are you a Koma convert?
Yeah, I might be a Koma convert all of a sudden. And I already liked it, but now I'm like less scared of it, which is, I don't know. So I'm gaining respect, I suppose. Anyway, do you have any like notable spicy cards you want to shout out that kind of like might fill generic roles of a deck, but that are more fun for this one? We did talk about Whelming Wave as like a board wipe, which I love for this deck. Very spicy.
Yeah, and it's like very like on theme of the deck too.
Yeah.
I think my probably my spiciest card in this deck, besides like the ones that make huge amounts of tokens, is Lithiform Engine, which is that legendary artifact that can either copy a trigger or an activated ability. It can copy an instant or sorcery, or it can copy a permanent as you cast it. So Lithiform Engine's great because if I have open mana on my upkeep, I can, or on whoever's upkeep I want to do it, I can copy Koma's ability to make a coil and make an extra one. And like if I'm in a counter spell off with somebody, I can make a copy of my counter spell. So Lithiform Engine's probably like the funniest card. And I do have that one signed by the guy who designed it as well. Not the artist, but the guy who actually built the card.
Oh, okay, that's cool. I like that. And I'm also seeing, so Lithiform Engine is one of those cards that I've always really liked since it came out, but I haven't like quite found a deck where it really fits. But this one seems perfect for it. You've got like tons of activated and triggered abilities, and even just like right above, at least on the Maxfield list, right above Lithiform Engine are some very interesting instants and sorceries that I think you would love to be copying. So
totally.
Yeah, now's probably a good time to talk about the extra turn spells that you've gotten here.
Yeah, so I only have 2. I do feel like with Koma, I don't want to necessarily have a ton of extra turn spells because I benefit more from other people's turns. It's just faster, and I don't want to sit there and take 3 turns in a row. Karn's Temporal Sundering, it costs a lot, but it's required to have Koma out to do it. I mean, or at least another legendary. So I feel like that one was like an auto include. And then I just added Temporal Manipulation because I got it in the Frazetta Secret Lair. But again, just, I want to take an extra turn, maybe get an extra coil, and maybe a couple other things. Like, I have a lot of other token generators like Reservoir. Is it Reservoir Kraken? Yeah, Reservoir Kraken makes tokens. So does Spawning Kraken. That one makes 9/9 Krakens.
Yeah.
And then I've also got like Rampaging Baloths and Avenger of Zendikar. I mean, that one's just like right when it comes out. But things like that and then also with like things like Elemental Bond, or Garrick's Pack Leader, whenever a 3/3 comes out, I get to draw a card. And so if that's happening like multiple times, then I'm drawing a lot of cards. So things like Karn's Temporal Sundering or Temporal Manipulation are good if I'm trying to like win the game at the end with like combat damage. Like I'm like, okay, I'm going to start my turn. I'm going to go to combat. I'm going to smack everybody and hopefully get rid of a lot of creatures on the board. And then I'm going to take an extra turn and do it again to hopefully close out the game.
Yeah, I can tell that this is like a very responsible use of extra turn spells. And which I'm into. I think having like a few extra turn spells in your deck just for exactly what you said, to kind of like use as like a finisher. So you just get another combat phase basically. I love that. I think people have gotten a little, maybe jaded is the right word, from like playing against that one person who took like 6 extra turns in a row.
Right.
Which does kind of take away some of the fun if they aren't like also winning when they're taking 6 extra turns, which does tend to happen sometimes. But yeah, so I think playing like Temporal Manipulation in a Koma deck like totally makes sense. And I'm sure you will be very close to winning by the time you are casting that, and you're making more tokens and you're getting more triggers and stuff like that. So yeah, I'm into that. Exactly. And then you also have this like super awesome scenario possible, which is with Lithoform Engine, and you copy one of those. So then you do just get a couple extra turns just to make sure things are finishing up in those turns.
Yeah, exactly. And I think a responsible extra turns is probably the exact perfect way to say what I hope to do, is take a responsible extra turn.
Yeah, taking an extra turn is kind of fun. I have like a couple extra turn spells here and there just because I enjoy it, and I do get like a groan or two when I play those sometimes with people I don't know, and I'm like, no, don't worry, I have it planned out. I'm gonna play this turn out really quickly. If I'm not gonna win, I'm just gonna like play it through really quickly so that I'm not like, taking twice as much time up. I'm that kind of player that like people are taking their turns and I'm like thinking about what I'm going to do next, barring like a crazy top deck, right? Like I'm being very, very thoughtful. And so especially when I'm like, okay, I'm ready to take my extra turn, I'm like, I already know what I'm going to do usually. So I don't sit there for 10 minutes like, do I do this turn and then this one my next turn? Like, I'm ready to do it. Yes, that is very much appreciated. I just watched the latest Command Zone episode was about like bad commander habits that you should try to give up in 2023. And that was one of the ones I totally agree with. Like when it's not your turn and you don't have anything to do, like your mind should be focused on what you're going to do on your next turn to kind of like make it go as quickly as possible.
Totally.
And with extra turns, you have like a lot of planning to do, right? Like you probably have a lot going on at that point and you need to kind of plan it out. So I like that a lot. And I think it also just makes it more fun. Like you're more, I don't know, you're just like in the game a little bit more in the headspace.
I think it makes the game your plays at least feel more thoughtful and you have like more intent. Like,
yes,
you know what you're going to do and you're being more thoughtful about those things.
Yeah, I'm super into that. And playing with people who do that, it's just fun because I feel like, for one, you get more games in because they go faster. And for another thing, it's just like I really like watching people play their turns out when they're like excited to do something and they have it all planned out and they're like putting the pieces together. I just find that really enjoyable to watch. So, okay. So my next question for you is one of my favorite questions. It's, do you have any pet cards in this deck that you just can't resist playing because you love them so much?
Yeah, so I'm a big fan of Junkwinder, which has affinity for tokens. I wouldn't say Junkwinder is not a card that like I put in every deck, but I do have it in this deck, and I have it in my Toxrill deck as well, because again, I'm making tokens. So the tap down ability to like stop people from doing stuff is really good, and it's really good in a deck where I'm making tokens every turn, multiple potentially. Again, this is a card that if I play it right and I'm ready to win the game, like Junkwinder is an essential part of trying to get that win at the end.
Yeah, I really like this card.
The fact that he can cost like 2 is so cool.
This is one of those. I remember I was brewing for a long time a Runo Stromkirk deck, which is all about the Krakens, Leviathans, Octopuses, and Serpents. I was playing it, just kind of like practicing it to see if I wanted to build it in real life. And Junkwinder ended up being, even though it's like an uncommon and it's kind of unassuming compared to other like Krakens and stuff, it was like one of the best ones in that deck.
Yeah. For sure. Yeah. One of the best cards. And it's kind of a sleeper hit. Yeah,
but once you start realizing like how many tokens you're making, especially in Koma, this makes even more tokens than Runo does. And and your opponent's like everything's tapped, so you just keep attacking them, and that's awesome.
Yeah.
Okay, so kind of on the other side of things, what would you say is the MVP card of the deck, or like the most synergistic card that you want to see if you're trying to win?
Doubling Season has to be the hit card of the deck, which I know is a very expensive card. But doubling your tokens, and like I said, I'm trying to make like beasts and krakens and serpents, and I'm like making a ton of tokens. So like when Avenger of Zendikar comes out and I've got 13 lands on the board, I'm gonna make 26 plants instead of 13 with doubling season. So it's just like, I know it's not like completely accessible because it's so expensive, but it's definitely like the hit card of the deck. The one that I like hope to get every single time. The other one that I really love is Merkfiend Liege, which I know people kind of don't love the lieges, but like Koma is green and blue, so he gets +2/+2, and I get to untap all of my creatures on everybody's turn. So I think that's great. All of my creatures are just always untapped. I'm always ready to block. I do feel like this card again is like one of the good cards, one of the better cards in this deck that has a lot of synergy.
I love Merkfiend Liege for this deck. I think that it's really cool that it gives Koma, it'll like give it 8 power, and that's like 3-hit commander damage territory, which I bet is like pretty possible with Koma's ability also being able to like tap down your opponent's creatures so they can't block.
And give them indestructible too, so that even if somebody does come in with the block, like it doesn't really affect. Yeah.
That's really cool. Yeah, I hadn't really thought about that, but I really like that card in this deck. I feel like it might be my fault that doubling season is so expensive, because it seems like every time I look the card up to look at its price, it's $10 higher than the last time. So,
seriously, I think it's 90 right now.
Oh my god, I don't know what's up with that, but it's maybe 2023 will be the year they reprint it.
Maybe
5 times and it'll finally be affordable. I need one for my oozes deck, but it's like, it's oozes. I'm not gonna spend $90 on one card, but oh man, it would be so fun.
Yeah, I don't usually buy really expensive cards. Actually, a lot of the cards that I have that are really expensive I pulled just like
nice,
just randomly. Doubling season was one of those ones that last year I was like, okay, I've had Koma for a year and a half now. It doesn't need doubling season, but it would be really good. And I'm going to a convention. I'm going to buy one nice, expensive card. And I decided on doubling season because also Chuck Lucas was there and he did the art for that one. There's one more card I want to shout out in this deck. And that one is going to be to Kodama of the East Tree.
Ooh.
Which is cool because, like I said, I have a lot of big creatures I want to bring out. So it's like whenever a permanent enters the battlefield under your control, if it wasn't put onto the battlefield with this ability, I can put a permanent card with equal or lesser converted mana cost from your hand onto the battlefield. So if I cast Koma, I can also drop another 7-drop creature that is potentially in my hand, as long as Kodama is out on the battlefield. So again, it's just one of those little things, like, because I want to cast like big creatures, I just have like one little insurance policy in there that's like, maybe I can cheat one out.
I like that. Yeah, Kodama of the East Tree is a sweet card in a deck with a bunch of huge creatures.
Yeah.
So I would be terrified if that were out and you hadn't cast Koma yet, which makes sense because that's like 6 mana and then the next turn cast Koma.
Totally.
Yeah, that's a really nice scenario that I would be very scared of. Oh, I like how you have fog in this deck. That's what I was going to say. I think that's like a very just like super unassuming card that I would love to see more people play, is just the classic fog. Because if all of your stuff, I don't know, there are a lot of situations where I feel like a fog would save me and help, like I would have won if I had one of those in hand.
Sure.
So yeah, I like that you're playing that in this deck.
So fog was a card I'd had since around the time I started playing, I believe. And it's one of those cards that I was like, well, if I'm going to go heavy on trying to do combat damage, then I might as well have a fog as a backup if combat does not go my way. Like, there's so many cards that someone can flash in on combat that could deal with what I'm trying to do. Or if somebody has like something out that's like you can cast sorceries at instant speed, then it's like they can bring out a bunch of tokens to block, just anything. Or if somebody is trying to board wipe me through a big combat phase or kill me, I can always fog just to save myself one turn or save my creatures one turn. But yeah, I love fog.
Yeah, it's one of those cards where when you're like putting the deck list together online, like it doesn't give you mana or card draw or removal really. So it's like so easy to not play it for that reason. But yeah, there are so many scenarios where like you swing out at somebody and it doesn't quite kill them. So you like, they will kill you on the crackback, but they don't know you have a fog. So then you can just do it again after that.
Totally.
Yeah, so many games come down to that, like one turn of combat difference would have changed the outcome. And yeah. My next question for you is one of my favorite questions. It's what has been your favorite like in-game moment that you've had while you were playing this deck?
Honestly, some of my favorite games I've played with this deck are games where I've lost.
Yes.
I played this deck at Magic Summit. This is the first one that comes to mind. I played this deck at Magic Summit. We were playing a game where we had 5 people. It was like basically it was like secret partners, and then there was one person that was like on their own. So the idea is with 5 people you have 2 sets of 2 that are on the same team, but they don't know they're on the same team. Gotcha. And then you have one person who's like the lone wolf, and that person knows that they're not in ally with anybody, but you don't know like who is on your team, and so you're trying to figure that out. And so I'm playing Koma. I get by my teammate, because the person who is the secret partner knows who's on their team. And so my teammate hits me with Ulamog, and I have to exile 20 cards. And I'm like sitting there like, oh my God, she's on my team, but she doesn't know it, and I don't know, I can't tell her. So I'm just like, I'm gonna exile 20 cards right now. And I exiled, I think she did it again. I exiled 40 cards. I had like no cards in my deck. And it's about to come around to my turn, and the person right before me had Lurking Predators out and was just dropping every creature in their deck on the battlefield. And I'm sitting there with a Whelming Wave in hand, thinking, if I can cast this, then I can win the game, because I'm going to basically wipe the board, and I have enough coils at this point that I can kill everybody with combat. And the person with the Lurking Predators, of course, won the game. I think with a Crater Hoof or something.
Yeah.
None of us could stop it. So, it's just one of those moments where I was like on the brink of winning and I didn't.
Yeah.
But it was still funny to get ulamogged by your teammate and just like hope that you can get to your turn.
Yeah.
That's probably the most recent game I played. That was one of my favorite plays.
I love that. I really like that style of game where you have 5 people and you do some kind of like secret teammates type of setup. I think there are a lot of cool ways to do that make it so that your 5-player game is like the same length as a normal like 3 or 4-player game, which helps a lot. But that's super fun. Like, it's cool to mix things up. And I love the idea that your partners like don't necessarily know who you are. That things like that can happen. You might accidentally get ulamogged by your secret partner. So yeah, that's good. And it's also, I know it's kind of like a thing to be like, oh, if I had one more turn. But sometimes it comes down to the wire, and it's really funny to be like, okay, if you hadn't done that, it was good timing for you.
I know, it's like people, like I do this, I am guilty of doing this, but like sometimes I'll like, when I lose, I'll like flip the 3 cards of my deck and be like, oh, I could have won, 3 turns later, but it's funny when you have the win in hand and you just didn't get to play it.
Yeah, it's true. That's how you know it was like a very well-balanced game, is when everyone's kind of like about to win around the same time. So yeah.
Conversations with people, I've had a lot of conversations recently with people when we're doing kind of that pre-game chat of what turn does your deck want to win on. And I'm finding that that's more helpful, but I'm also finding that I don't often know what turn my deck wants to win on. And so, I'm like, I know that I can do this by this turn, but can I win the game quickly after? So yeah, I think I do like that advice and that recommendation in terms of like how you talk about your decks. Like, what turn are you going to be doing a bunch of stuff, Yeah,
totally. I think that's honestly kind of like a better conversation starter for like the rule 0 conversation than just what do you think the power level is? Because even if you don't know exactly like when your deck can win by, which is almost impossible to know because you never, like, Commander's so complicated, you'll never know what's going on at any given moment. But I do think that's kind of a good way to like start that conversation, to be like, this deck is like pretty fast and can do a ton of damage by this turn. It just kind of like gets you talking a little bit more about your deck, which is what we need more of. I think it helps a lot to know that kind of stuff. I like it. Yeah. And that's just good advice in general to maybe like be thinking of when you're playing your deck. Like, if you happen to win, you're like, what turn is it? And then you can kind of mentally keep that for later. Like, last time I played, I won by about this turn. And so that kind of, helps in future games too.
Maybe I'm making this up, but I thought I heard of somebody who, with their decks, they keep a log of like certain milestones or things that have happened with it. Like, how they won a certain game, what turn it was, or when they lost, like what did they lose to, and do they have an answer to that they could have played? Like, just kind of like a lot of stats that were really interesting that I've thought about potentially doing, but haven't done it. Maybe 2023 is the year that I log my deck stats.
Yeah, I think I saw that too. Was that the Guardian Project podcast?
I think it might have been,
Yeah, so anyone who hasn't seen that, it's Andy and Mike from Guardian Project podcast. They do exactly that. They like track a whole bunch of different stats for their Commander games. And then I think they just released a bunch of like data analyses on that from 2022, which is super interesting. Maybe that's also the year for me to actually start paying attention to that stuff, because it does seem very useful.
Yeah.
Okay, so I mean, we're coming up on the end. I'm excited to get to this last question. This has been a ton of fun. What advice would you give to players out there who want to build a deck like this? Whether it's like Koma, similar to how you've built it with multiple different game plans, or just kind of a Koma deck in general. What advice would you give to those people?
my main two themes in this deck, the two most important themes, I believe, are ramping, because you want to try to get Koma out, and you have to know that he's probably going to try to be removed. So ramping enough that you can potentially play him again is super important. And then obviously, on top of that, protecting him so that he doesn't go anywhere. A lot of counterspells or removal to remove other people's things so that they can't destroy Koma in any way, or do anything. I know sometimes people will tap down Koma so that his abilities don't trigger. That's problematic because then he doesn't do anything at all.
Yeah.
So having removal for those kinds of scenarios. And then drawing a lot of cards is really a way to combat my main issue with Koma, which is getting mana flooded. Those are probably the three most important things. I think the other things that I have going on in this deck are more just fun. It's a lot of like good stuff in here, just cards that are fun and splashy that I love. But if you want to build this just to really center and hone in on Koma, I think you just need card draw, ramp, and protection. Those are the most important things.
I like it. Yeah, I think that's great advice. It's pretty wild how Koma is pretty like very self-reliant, I guess. Like if you just have Koma out, you're still going to be able to build up a board. And
totally.
Yeah, so that makes sense. Cool. Okay, I am definitely a Koma convert now. I think this deck is really cool, and I appreciate you for sharing it with me. Thank you so much, Katie.
Yeah, thank you so much for having me on. I love talking about Koma. It's the deck that I have the soft spot for. It's my first commander deck. So obviously when you asked me what deck I would choose, I was like, well, I have to pick my Snake Boy Koma.
Yes. I love it. Yeah, and I also think if anyone is like trying to get their friends into Commander or Magic, I think like a Simic deck is a really good way to go, because it has like all the tools very easily that you need for a new deck. Like card draw, mana ramp, and removal are all just like top tier. So yeah, it seems like a great place to get somebody into Commander like it did for you.
For sure. I think, Simic is definitely one of my favorite color combinations, just because it has everything you need.
Yeah, it's true. And sometimes like that's just what you want. Like you don't want to have to worry about like fighting against what your colors are doing to try to put a deck together, which it can be fun. It's like fun to build decks that way. But if you're a new player or just want to throw it together, I think Koma is a great place to start.
My other deck that does something similar to this is Toxtrol, right? And that's in Dimir, like blue and black. And that color combination does not want to ramp at all. So it's a lot of like artifacts to get the mana out there. And if any kind of mana ramp that I can do, like Dark Ritual, stuff like that. So having Koma, it just does it. I play Koma and then I play Toxtrol and I'm like, oh my God, getting mana is impossible.
That's kind of funny. Yeah, I really like how, Toxtrol definitely seems like it, like building it, you could take a lot of lessons from playing and building Koma already. But then, adjusting to black and blue, you have to be like, okay, I know I need like a certain amount of ramp cards, but they look quite a bit different and not as good.
They do. Yeah. They cost quite a bit more too.
Yep, that's funny. Yeah, I really like that comparison. Something I never would have thought of before we started talking. So yeah thank you for teaching me a little bit about Commander. I loved it.
Oh gosh, you're welcome. I never thought I would ever teach anybody anything about Commander.
That's what I'm here for, and I'm super into it. So anyway, thank you so much for coming on and talking to me for an hour about one of your Commander decks. And
thank you for having me.
Of course. So if anyone out there wants to find Katie's content, and you definitely should, I'll have all the links in the episode description below. But Katie, do you have anything that you'd like to plug, or any upcoming stuff going on that you want to shout out?
I'm just streaming pretty regularly on Wednesdays. I'm guesting a little bit more on some other people's streams. I hope to be at a Magic event this year. I think I'm going to go to the Magic Con Vegas in September. But besides that, nothing much nothing new over here.
Nice. Okay. Yeah, you definitely should check out Katie's weekly Wednesday streams. So yeah, but yeah, I also want to go to at least one Magic event this year, because I had so much fun at the summit last year, and that was my first event as a content creator. So I am looking forward to the next one, and I live pretty close to Vegas, so maybe I'll have to do that. Okay, yeah, and if you want to find me, I'm Alec at the Faerie Conclave. I'll have my links down below as well. Oh, I'm also a Dragon Shield affiliate, so if you want to buy some Dragon Shield stuff, use my link and get your stuff. I really like the custom sleeves. You can literally put anything you want on some Dragon Shield sleeves, and I think that's pretty neat. You can do some really fun stuff with that.
I have custom Dragon Shield sleeves for one of my decks, for my Teysa Karlov deck, which, Katie Karlov, Teysa Karlov.
Yep.
So yeah, I love using Dragon Shield's custom sleeve generator.
Yes, it's kind of addicting. I'm like always thinking about what silly stuff I can put on my sleeves.
Yes.
It's just, yeah, it's a cool way to like add some personality to your favorite commander decks, which if you're like me, you spend at least 1,000 hours looking at online and like researching. So yeah,
totally.
I love it. Cool. Okay, thank you everyone for listening and joining us today. I hope you join us again next time, and until then, have a good time. I'll see you soon.